Right, I'm just going to make a short video, hopefully, for a change. Rook versus pawn, and what happens if the attacking side's rook is in front of the pawn, which we haven't covered yet, basically. White to play in this position. This is a famous study from 1922. I mean, I say famous, it's not as famous as some of his other studies. We associate Reti with that one where the king's in there on h8 and can't seemingly get back to catch a pawn, so it's dual purpose king moves. But Reti just keeps popping up all over the place with some incredible studies. This one's pretty good too. You know, pause the video and have a go at it and spend some time on it. It's definitely a good one to think about. It involves the opposition effectively, which is a common theme coming up again. Also, if you remember Reti's position study, where in knight versus bishop, a video I've done pretty recently, where the bishop is just on an open board and has a choice of 7 different squares. Every single one of them virtually is getting forked by a knight, which is in the middle of the board and can't be captured by the king. An astonishing study. So Reti was pretty good at making these studies up, but this one's a good one as well. You've had more than enough time to pause the video and find one of 2 winning moves, which are move the rook back on the d file, obviously, but just not to d1. Basically, rook d1 chucks away the win. So rook d3 is fine, but rook d2 is also fine. And the point is that black can push this pawn and has the opposition, d4. Okay, black has the opposition. And that's why you wanted to not play rook d1, because now you play rook d1 and white has the opposition. If black had played a king move, it's going to be fine, because you know, even if the rook was on d3, king e4, we can still play rook d1. It doesn't really matter if we can pretend our rook had been hit on d3, but the point is that the white king's now ready to come to d6. That was the transposition. So let's go rook d2, d4, rook d1, and now what does black do? If the king comes in, the white king comes round. It's just a simple counting exercise. White's won. If going back to this position, if black realizes that here after this rook d1 and tries to sort of shoulder the white king away, king d5. So here king f6 would be a mistake, because now king e4 shoulders the king away. That's a move black wanted to play anyway. White should play king d7 and keep the opposition. And black's got to choose a side. If they go that way, we come this way. So king c4, king e6. King e4 would have been met by king c6. And there we are. That's a study, 1922, by Reti. White to play and win. You have to play rook d2 or rook d3 first, and then once black has spent this tempo that they had in hand keeping the opposition, then you play rook d1. You've got the opposition. There's a vital tempo. This is a zugzwang position, basically. Whoever is to move in this position gets the undesirable result. And we can get back to the debate about, like, yeah, all right, very clever, but it's a study. These things, they just don't happen in games. You know, and I think I've done enough studies now to sort of see the power of the pieces and blah, 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 and transferable skills, yeah, all that stuff. But it just doesn't happen in games. So, all right, 2008 game, black to move. What would you play? Pause the video and decide. Now in this position, this doesn't thwart the it just doesn't happen in games. I don't need these studies for games argument. Notice the demeanour I give that hypothetical person that's having an argument with me on this. The most obvious move here is still just fine, and I don't think we've yet been convincing that no, that it does happen in games. That Reti study is a thing that if you understand it, it'll be useful. It could be useful to you actually in one of your games, even aside from the transferable skills and it's fun argument. Because the obvious move here is just King C2. I mean, you really just don't need to know anything about Reti, do you? Just to count your king moves up the board, and sure enough, it's just fine. King E5, King C3. Win. And you're still at like, alright, that's just a win, King C2. I mean, King D2 throws away the win, sorry. But then white's got to find the... So imagine you're white and black plays King D2. What would you play here? And it's shouldering. It comes from that. If you'd seen that Reti study, you'd find King D4 in a flash. And you just keep the opposition. Black can't make progress. The only way black can make progress is to try and come around the outside. But now they're just too far away, and you can go for it. Even keeping the opposition there. But you go back to the original position, and you say, yeah, but no one's going to play King D2. I wouldn't play King D2. It does seem a strange move to play, to be honest. So King C2. But we've already seen what happens if white just sort of politely, gets on with it. What would you do against King D4? Then what would you do? Okay, would you find that just sort of over the board by hand, without having seen that study? You probably would still, to be honest. I still don't think the argument against this hypothetical person has been won. King D2. I mean, it's fairly clear that if the king comes around the outside, we're going to shoulder the king away, and that's going to be a draw. But King D2, this is a win for black. You force the king in one direction, and that's a win. So you could even in this position still say, okay, all right, fine, that was from a game, but I think you would have worked out what the moves are over the board quite happily without having, without being subjected to this 1922 Rook D2 brilliance, this study by Reti. I don't think I needed that. I had this game, and I would have, if I'd had this game in 2008, I would have been fine. Fine, all right. Let's try this game from 1997. I'm not saying I'm going to win this argument against this hypothetical person, by the way, but I think this one stands a better chance of convincing. It's black to play. Not a lot to discuss, really. But black's got to take that pawn. I mean, I really can't see the point of black doing anything else. If the rook moves f6, yeah, I mean, that's just ridiculously gone. Black's got to take that and then grab the f5 pawn. What would you do now as white? What would your next move be? You could say, well, king f7. It's obvious. Like, all right. Then black plays d4. Then what would you do? Well, then I'll bring my king round to e7. I'm just sort of going to make this king journey here. King e5. Now what would you do? This is harder. It's not necessarily obvious that, well, white's only got one winning move. I suppose you could still argue that you could sort of look at that one winning move and count out the moves. It all comes down to the opposition. It's basically the Reti study again. We play rook d1. And if black plays king d5, only one winning move still, king d7. And then we're down to the same thing again. So this is from a game, and it's finishing off with basically that same Reti study again. So yeah, rook takes g7, king takes g7, king takes f5, king f7. If white tries to, if white just thinks, oh well, I've got to get my rook to d1 and plays it now, then they've thrown away the win because the king comes straight to e4, king f6, d4. That's just a draw. What else is there to say? If after king f7, king d4, sorry, because black's got the opposition. If you try rook d1 at this stage, you've also thrown away the win to king e4. So it has to be king e7, threatening to come round. King e5. Yeah, and here if you play king d7 rather than rook d1, d3, and the black king's coming in. So it is a win for white. You could say, oh yeah, I would have found those moves over the board. But if you are aware of this rook in front of the pawn, sorry, and the opposition idea with the kings back there, then you can simply just play those moves. Anyway, that was my best attempt to that position there, and just knowing how to win it as white. King f7, king e7, and then rook d1. I'm claiming that anyone who had a knowledge of this study, where rook d2 is the only winning first move, because you've got to appreciate black's got this tempo and then you've got to have the opposition, I'm saying a knowledge of that in advance would have made that 1997 position easier for white to win. Okay. If you still disagree, that's absolutely fine, and then I'm back to transferable skills. And if you disagree with that, I'm back to it's still just fun, isn't it? What a brilliant position. There's two winning moves, but only one winning idea, and don't put your rook on d1. I mean, to be honest, if you've been watching, my in-game videos, then by now you know I'm a fan of studies and do the. I think there are transferable skills. You never know, they might come up in a game, and even if all of that fails, they're still just good fun anyway. Anyway, that's Reti Returns. I'm sure I will encounter many of his other studies and positions as I keep going through endgame stuff. Hope you like that.